Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
A low mist clung to the streets of London, swirling around the tall iron gates of the Ministry of Magic like restless ghosts. The clock in the atrium had just chimed 11 when Harry Potter closed the file on his desk and rubbed his eyes. The ministry was quiet at that hour, the kind of stillness that only came when even the most diligent clerks had gone home. Only the faint hum of enchanted lamps broke the silence, their golden light reflecting off the badge pinned to his robes. Auror Office, Senior Investigator. Harry leaned back in his chair. He had thought that after the war, peace would come easily. The dark wizards would vanish like smoke after Voldemort's fall. But darkness had a way of lingering, seeping into corners and old ruins, into places where no light dared to go. He glanced toward the far side of the office, where a familiar red-haired figure was pacing back and forth. Ron Weasley, now his partner and fellow Auror, was muttering about something involving a teapot that had exploded during a raid. Still thinking about that file, mate? Ron asked, noticing Harry's distracted expression. You've been staring at it for half an hour. Harry smiled faintly. Just wrapping things up. Thought we'd finally get a quiet week. Ron snorted. You say that every time. That's when something dreadful happens. You'll see. As if summoned by Ron's words, the green flames in the fireplace roared to life. From the emerald blaze, a figure emerged, a witch in formal navy robes, her expression grave and urgent. Harry, Ron, said Hermione Granger, stepping into the office. Her curls were tied back neatly, though a few strands had escaped in her haste. We've got a situation. Harry straightened instantly. What kind of situation? Hermione set a thick folder on his desk. A new building has appeared overnight in the Highlands. The locals think it's a hotel. Calls itself the Eldritch Hollow. But there's a problem. It's not on any magical registry, and she hesitated. No one can leave once they go inside. The words hung in the air like frost. Ron frowned. No one can leave? You mean they're trapped? Hermione nodded. The Department of Magical Accidents sent 2 investigators early this morning. They haven't come back. The place wasn't there yesterday. Muggle authorities can't see it at all, just an empty hillside. But our sensors picked up heavy enchantment activity. Very old magic. Harry opened the file and skimmed the reports. Blurred photographs of a tall, ivy-covered hotel standing alone in the mist, its windows dark and lifeless. A handwritten note at the bottom caught his eye. Time behaves irregularly inside. Some witnesses report the same hour repeating. He looked up. We're going there tonight. Ron groaned. Brilliant. So much for that quiet week. Hermione gave a thin smile. I thought you'd say that. By midnight they stood on the edge of the Scottish Highlands, the wind howling across the desolate moor. Their wands glimmered faintly in the darkness. The ground sloped downward toward a narrow valley, and there, half shrouded in fog, stood the hotel. It was 3 stories tall, built of black stone with windows like hollow eyes. A crooked sign swung from rusted chains above the entrance, the Eldritch Hollow Hotel. Guests welcome. Ron shivered. Looks friendly enough. Stay alert, said Harry. His instincts were prickling, The air around the building felt wrong, too cold, too still. He drew his wand and muttered, "Hominum revelio." The spell shimmered, but instead of the usual golden outlines of living beings, the air pulsed with shifting spectral shapes. Echoes of people, perhaps, or something pretending to be them. "Merlin's beard," whispered Ron. "What are those?" "Not alive," said Harry quietly. "But not dead either." They stepped forward, the gravel crunching underfoot. As they reached the doors, Hermione examined the wood. "Runes of temporal distortion," she murmured. "This is advanced magic, older than Hogwarts itself." Before they could react, the doors creaked open by themselves, revealing a grand lobby dimly lit by floating candles. The chandeliers swayed gently, though no wind touched them. Ron muttered, "If a ghost offers me a room key, I'm apparating straight back to London." They entered cautiously. The air smelled faintly of lilac and dust. A bell rang somewhere at the reception desk. Behind it stood a pale woman in an old-fashioned gown, her hands folded neatly. "Welcome to the Eldritch Hollow," she said in a voice soft as silk. "Do you have a reservation?" The three exchanged wary glances. "No," said Harry slowly. "We're here from the Ministry. We'd like to ask a few questions." The woman smiled, though her eyes were empty and gray. "All guests ask questions at first, but you'll find the time has a way of answering everything here." And before any of them could move, the candles flickered, and the great doors behind them slammed shut. A sudden silence fell, deep and absolute. Ron turned to the door and pulled at the handle. It didn't budge. "Locked," he muttered, "just like Hermione said. We're trapped." Harry's grip tightened on his wand. "Then we'll find another way out." The woman's voice echoed again, now from everywhere at once, soft but chilling. "Oh, you'll find many doors in Eldritch Hollow, Mr. Potter, but only one leads home." Somewhere above them, a clock struck midnight, and as its last chime faded, the hotel seemed to breathe, walls shifting, shadows deepening, as though the building itself had just woken up. The air inside the Eldritch Hollow felt thick, as though the very walls were breathing. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching and curling like living things. Harry raised his wand higher, the beam of light flickering across the ornate carpet that stretched down a long corridor. The pattern seemed to move underfoot, gold threads shifting subtly like ripples in a dark pond. Hermione examined the grand hall with sharp eyes. The chandeliers above were swaying gently, yet no wind stirred. Paintings lined the walls, their subjects strangely still, as if even the brushstrokes feared to move. "This place," she whispered, "is feeding on enchantment. It's not built, it's bound." Ron frowned, his wand shaking slightly. "Bound to what?" Hermione didn't answer. Instead, she stepped toward the front desk, where the pale receptionist still stood perfectly motionless. Her gray eyes gleamed faintly in the candlelight. Harry approached her slowly. "You said there's only one door that leads home. What does that mean?" The woman tilted her head, her voice soft as a lullaby. "Every guest must find their own door. Until they do, the hollow holds them." Ron muttered, "Right, that's comforting." Before they could press further, the woman vanished, dissolving into mist. In her place, a golden key appeared on the counter with a small tag attached. Room 13. The number sent a chill down Harry's spine. He picked it up carefully. The key was cold as ice, heavier than it should have been. The tag bore strange runes, looping ancient symbols that shimmered faintly. Hermione examined them. Temporal seals. She's right. This place is bound by time magic. And this key, it's directing us somewhere. Then we follow it, said Harry. We find out who built this place and why. They crossed the lobby toward the grand staircase. As they climbed, the floorboards groaned softly beneath their feet, like a sleeping giant turning in its slumber. The corridors above were lined with dark mahogany doors, each bearing a brass number. Ron's voice broke the silence. How is it we've never heard of this place? Something this cursed. Someone would have noticed. Hermione glanced back. Unless it hides itself. A pocket dimension, perhaps. Folded time. Her brow furrowed. If it is, then every minute we spend here could be hours or days outside. Harry nodded grimly. All the more reason to end this quickly. They reached the end of the corridor where a single black door waited. The number gleamed faintly. 13. Harry fit the key into the lock. It turned with a sharp click. The door opened to reveal a grand suite lit by pale moonlight. Heavy curtains framed tall windows, though beyond them there was nothing. No sky, no stars, only endless mist. A fire burned in the hearth, though no wood fueled it. As they stepped inside, a faint melody drifted through the air. A violin, soft and mournful, echoing from somewhere unseen. On the table rested a guest ledger, open to a page covered in neat handwriting. Hermione leaned closer. The names were familiar. Dawlish, Proudfoot, the missing investigators. Each name had a date beside it, followed by the same word, departed. Ron swallowed hard. That doesn't mean what I think it does it? Before anyone could answer, the fire flared, casting long shadows across the room. A whisper rose, low at first, then louder, clearer. You shouldn't have come. Harry spun around. Who's there? The voice came from the mirror above the fireplace. Its surface rippled like water, and within it a man's face appeared. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, and pale as bone. His hair was long and black, his expression filled with bitterness. You trespass in my house, he said. The hollow is not for the living. Who are you? Harry demanded. The reflection tilted its head. A name long forgotten. But once I was called Corvinus Gaunt. Hermione's breath caught. Gaunt? As in? Yes, the figure hissed. The last of that cursed line. Left to rot while others carried our blood to glory and ruin. I tried to restore what was lost, to turn back the years. But time turned on me. The walls trembled. The fire roared higher, crimson and gold. I built this haven, Corvinus went on, a place outside time where the dead might return. But it demands a price. Regret, sorrow, memory, such things feed the hollow. Harry stepped forward, his wand raised. You're trapping people here, feeding on them. The mirror cracked slightly, a spider web of fractures spreading from the center. Not I, whispered Gaunt. The magic itself, it lives now beyond my control. Leave while you can before it claims you too. We would, if the doors weren't locked, Ron said sharply. The reflection's eyes softened. Then find the heart, break it, and the hollow will die. The image flickered and vanished. The mirror returned to stillness, its surface dull once more. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Finally, Hermione whispered, the heart. It must mean a power source, some artifact anchoring the enchantment. Harry nodded. Then we find it. But as he turned toward the door, he froze. The corridor beyond had changed. The floor no longer led back to the staircase. It stretched endlessly into darkness, the walls warping, bending like a maze. Ron swore under his breath. brilliant. The place is shifting. They stepped cautiously into the hall. Portraits now whispered as they passed, soft voices murmuring fragments of memory. One frame showed the receptionist smiling faintly, holding a bouquet of black lilies. Another depicted a grand ballroom filled with dancers, but all of them were frozen mid-step, their faces blurred. Then somewhere far down the corridor came a sound, a child's laughter, faint but unmistakable. "Did you hear that?" Hermione whispered. Harry nodded, already moving toward it. "Stay close." They followed the sound through a maze of twisting halls until they reached a smaller door, half open. Inside was what looked like a nursery. Dusty toys scattered on the floor, a rocking horse swaying gently. In the corner sat a little girl, pale and still, humming softly to herself. Hermione knelt beside her. "Hello there. Are you all right?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were wide and distant like mirrors. "You're the new guests," she said. "He's watching you." "Who?" asked Harry. "The man who built the house," she whispered. "He doesn't like when people leave. He says the Hollow needs company." Before they could question her further, the girl faded, vanishing like smoke. The rocking horse continued to move, creaking softly in the silence. Hermione rose slowly. "We're dealing with more than enchantment. These are echoes, memories preserved by the curse." Harry's jaw tightened. Then somewhere in this place, Gaunt's power is still alive. We destroy it, and we free them all. Ron muttered, "Hopefully before we end up as the next departed on that ledger." As they stepped back into the hall, the air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in. Somewhere deep within the hotel, a bell began to toll, slow, mournful, counting the hours that refused to pass. And above the echoing sound, faint but unmistakable, came a whisper that curled through the corridors like smoke. "The Hollow remembers everyone who enters, and it never lets go." The bell's echoes lingered long after their tolling ceased, as though the sound itself refused to die. Dust drifted from the ceiling with every reverberation, and the light of Harry's wand flickered against the warped wallpaper. The hotel was shifting again, its very bones rearranging. The floor beneath their feet seemed to breathe. Ron glanced warily at a portrait that now hung crooked on the wall. It depicted the same grand ballroom they'd seen before, but this time the figures inside it moved. Men and women in elegant attire danced in silence, their faces blurred into gray smudges. As he watched, one of the dancers turned toward him, and for a fleeting instant her eyes were hollow pits of shadow. The painting let out a faint sigh, and Ron stumbled back. "Keep moving," Harry said quietly. "Don't look too long at anything here." Hermione's expression was tight, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This place feeds on perception. It wants us to get lost." They pressed onward, their footsteps echoing down the endless corridor until the floor tilted slightly downward, leading into a grand staircase spiraling into darkness. The railings were cold under Harry's fingers. Metal, not wood, though it pulsed faintly as if alive. Somewhere below came the faint scrape of metal against stone. Ron gripped his wand tighter. "Remind me again why every cursed place has to come with its own creepy basement." Hermione gave a small, distracted smile. "Because the worst magic hides in the dark." When they reached the bottom, the air was colder. The corridor here was lined with cracked mirrors and faded wallpaper. Cobwebs hung thick from the ceiling. Faintly, Harry could hear a rhythmic dripping sound. steady as a heartbeat. They followed it until the passage opened into a wide chamber filled with old furniture and trunks, piled haphazardly, as though someone had tried to bury the past. At the far end stood a large, ornate clock. Its face was shattered, the hands frozen at midnight. Hermione examined it closely. "It's identical to the one upstairs," she murmured. "But this one's connected to a ley line. See the runes? This clock might control the time distortion." Harry's eyes narrowed. "Can we break it?" She hesitated. "If we do it wrong, we could collapse the whole structure with us inside. But if we find its anchor, what Corvinus Gaunt called the heart, we might sever its power safely." Ron pointed to a faint glow beneath the clock. A trapdoor. The edges pulsed faintly with golden light. "That looks promising," he muttered. Harry knelt, brushing aside the dust. As soon as his fingers touched the metal ring, a whisper swept through the chamber. Cold, angry, and ancient. The shadows stirred. From the darkness, beyond the mirror-lined walls, pale shapes began to emerge, dozens of them translucent and quivering like mist, faces half-formed, eyes blank. "The lost guests," Hermione breathed. "They're trapped here." The spirits moved closer, their mouths opening and closing in soundless pleas. One reached out a hand toward Harry, and he felt a wave of icy sorrow wash through him, memories not his own flooding his mind. Laughter, a family, a journey that ended in this cursed place. He stumbled back, shaking off the vision. "We have to free them," he said, "before they fade completely." Hermione nodded, tracing her wand in the air. "Finite incantatem," she cried. The spell rippled outward, striking the mirrors. The glass shuddered and cracked, and for a moment the ghosts faltered. But the hotel fought back. The air twisted, the floor buckled, and the mirrors began to mend themselves. A deep, rumbling voice filled the room, everywhere and nowhere at once. "You cannot undo what was woven with blood." The temperature dropped sharply. Frost crept across the clock face. The trapdoor burst open, and a gust of freezing wind swept through. From below rose a figure in tattered robes, his face half hidden by shadow. His eyes burned with faint silver light. "Corvinus Gaunt," Harry said. The ghost smiled faintly. "You seek the heart as I once did. You'll find it only where time began and ended." Ron raised his wand. "Try making sense for once." But the ghost merely looked at them with something almost like pity. "You can't destroy the hollow without destroying yourselves. It is built from grief, the same grief that clings to you still, Harry Potter." Harry stiffened. "You don't know anything about me." "Oh, but I do," whispered Gaunt. "The hollow feeds on regret, and yours burns brightest of all." The shadows surged toward them. Harry threw up a shield just in time, the spell blazing like sunlight against a storm. "Move," he shouted. They ran, weaving through the corridors, as the building groaned and shifted. The staircase they descended had vanished, replaced by a narrow hallway lined with doors. Hundreds of them, each numbered 13. "Don't stop," Hermione called. "It's trying to trap us in loops." The air shimmered. For a heartbeat, Harry thought he saw another version of himself at the far end of the corridor, wand drawn, running toward him. Their eyes met, and both froze. Then the image dissolved, leaving only mist. They burst through a final door and stumbled into what looked like the hotel's dining hall. A grand table stretched the length of the room, covered in silverware and empty plates. Candles burned low, their flames blue-white, At the head of the table sat the same receptionist, her gray eyes hollow. "Dinner is served," she said softly. The plates began to fill themselves, roasted meats, fruit, steaming soups, but everything smelled faintly of decay. Ron gagged. "I'm definitely not eating that." Hermione pointed toward the far wall. A mural had been painted there, an enormous tree with its roots coiling deep into the ground. At its center was a glowing mark identical to the runes on the key they'd found. "The heart," she whispered. "It's beneath this room." The moment she spoke, the floor shuddered violently. The mural began to bleed light, cracks spidering outward across the walls. The ghosts returned, hundreds now circling above the table like pale smoke. Harry raised his wand. "Hermione, how do we reach it?" She cast a quick incantation, tracing sigils in the air. The mural shimmered, revealing a stone passage hidden beneath the floor. "There, but we'll need to hold them off." Ron grinned grimly. "Right then, let's make it quick." As Hermione descended into the glowing passage, Harry and Ron faced the oncoming swarm. The ghosts screamed, voices filled with pain and longing. Spells flashed through the dim hall, bursts of gold and silver cutting through the shadows, but each time one fell, it reformed again. "Harry," Ron shouted, "they're endless!" Harry's eyes flicked to the mural. Light was pouring from it now, dazzling white. Hermione's voice echoed from below, urgent and strained. "Almost there. Keep them back." The ground split with a deafening crack. A blinding pulse erupted from the mural, throwing them all to the floor. The ghosts wailed as their forms unraveled, dissolving into streaks of light. When the brilliance faded, Harry blinked. The dining hall was gone. He was standing in a vast underground chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood Hermione, pale and trembling, holding the golden key, now glowing brighter than ever. "I found it," she whispered, "the heart of the hollow." Behind her, something began to stir, a shape coalescing in the shadows, immense and formless, like the hotel itself had grown a soul. A deep, resonant voice filled the air, neither male nor female, but ancient and full of sorrow. "You would destroy me," it said, "but I was born from your world's pain. Every broken promise, every death unhealed. I am what your kind leaves behind." Hermione's hand shook, but she raised her wand. "And now you'll end." The light from the key flared once more, bathing the chamber in gold. The walls trembled. Dust rained down. The hollow screamed. Harry reached her side. "Do it!" Hermione pressed the key against the ground. With a cry, she unleashed the spell. The floor split open and the light swallowed everything. Walls, ghosts, even the air itself. And then, silence. A heartbeat. And the world went dark. Silence hung like a veil over the world, deep and endless. For a long while, Harry could not tell if he was alive or dreaming. He floated in darkness, the echo of Hermione's spell still ringing faintly in his mind like a fading bell. Somewhere distant, he thought he heard water dripping, the sound soft as rain on stone. When at last he opened his eyes, the light was dim and gray. He lay on cold marble beneath a domed ceiling etched with constellations that shimmered faintly in the gloom. The air smelled faintly of salt and smoke. Around him stretched a vast, ruined hall, the remains of what might once have been a ballroom. Fragments of chandeliers lay scattered on the floor, their crystals glinting weakly like stars fallen to earth. Ron stirred nearby, groaning. "Please tell me we didn't just blow ourselves into another dimension." Harry managed a weary half-smile. "Feels like it." He He pushed himself upright. His wand still burned faintly at his side, casting trembling shadows against the cracked pillars. "Hermione?" A voice answered from the far side of the room, soft but steady. "Here." She was kneeling beside a fallen column, her robes torn and dusted with ash, but her eyes were bright. In her hands she still clutched the golden key, though its glow had dimmed to a dull ember. "The spell worked," she said, breathing hard. "At least, I think it did. The energy in the air, it's different." Ron glanced around. "Different how?" "Because it still feels cursed to me." Hermione frowned thoughtfully, studying the walls. "No, the magic's weaker, fractured. We must be inside the core, what's left of the Hollow's heart." Harry's gaze drifted toward the far end of the hall. There, on a raised dais, stood a mirror, tall, cracked, and rimmed in tarnished silver. In its depths shimmered faint reflections that didn't quite match reality. Sometimes the glass showed them, sometimes it showed something else, a vast hotel standing tall and whole, frozen in eternal twilight. He took a cautious step toward it. "I think it's showing us what's left outside, or what used to be." Hermione followed his gaze, brow furrowing. "It's possible the entire structure has folded in on itself. We're standing in the final echo." Ron kicked lightly at a broken chair leg. "Echo or not, how do we leave it?" The whole "only one door leads home" business wasn't exactly clear. Before Hermione could answer, the mirror rippled, and a shadow stepped through. Corvinus Gaunt emerged like smoke made solid, his eyes dim and cold. The edges of his figure shimmered as though the air itself struggled to contain him. He looked weaker than before, his form fraying at the edges. "You destroyed the heart," he said, his voice echoing from every direction at once. "And with it, you've undone the spell that bound me." Harry raised his wand, but the ghost merely shook his head. "No need for that, Potter. I am not your enemy, not anymore." Hermione stepped forward, cautious. "You said this place was born from grief. Does that mean it can die?" Gaunt's expression twisted into something between sorrow and bitterness. "It dies even now. The walls crumble. The souls once trapped here will fade or pass beyond. But not all chains can be broken. Some regrets cling like ivy." His eyes flicked to Harry, sharp as a knife. "You, for instance." Harry said nothing. The old pain stirred, the faces of the fallen flashing through his mind like ghosts in a storm. Fred, Tonks, Lupin, Dobby. So many gone, so many memories he had tried to bury beneath duty. Gaunt smiled faintly. "You see? The Hollow feeds on that. It was never truly mine. It was built from the sorrow of the world. I merely gave it form. And now it's falling apart," said Ron. "Good riddance." But Gaunt didn't seem to hear him. He turned toward the mirror, staring into its fractured depths. "When I began my work, I wanted to reverse time, to bring back my family, but time is a cruel master. It gives nothing freely." His fingers brushed the glass. "Now all that remains is reflection." The mirror flared suddenly, the light almost blinding. Images swirled within it, moments frozen in time. Harry saw flashes of the battle at Hogwarts, the shattered halls, the desperate courage in the faces of his friends. He saw his parents, fleeting and bright as candlelight. Then, a different image. The hotel itself, whole and radiant, its windows blazing with golden light. "The Hollow will take one last breath," Gaunt whispered. "And in that breath, it will choose what remains. You can leave if you find your door, but you must decide what you'll leave behind Before they could speak, the mirror cracked with a sharp sound like thunder. The air warped, bending around them. The hall began to dissolve, the floor shifting into long corridors once more, doors materializing on every side. Each door shimmered faintly, some glowing gold, others dull and dark. "The doors," Hermione gasped. "They lead out." Harry's pulse quickened. "How do we know which one?" Gaunt's form flickered. "The hollow knows its guests. It will show you what you need most. But beware, what you want may not be the same as what will set you free." And with that he faded into mist. The ground trembled, the air thickened again, humming with dying magic. One by one the doors began to swing open, each revealing something different beyond, visions that tugged at the heart. From one door came the sound of laughter, familiar and impossible. Harry turned toward it and froze. Beyond the threshold stood the Burrows' kitchen, golden with morning light. Mrs. Weasley was bustling about, and Ginny sat at the table smiling at him as if nothing had ever gone wrong. "Harry," her voice was soft, warm, achingly real. For a heartbeat he almost stepped through. "Don't," Hermione's voice cut through, firm and clear. She gripped his arm. "It's not real. It's what the Hollow wants you to see." He looked again, and the vision wavered. The warmth turned cold. The kitchen faded to gray. Beyond the door was nothing but swirling mist. He stepped back, shaking his head. Ron was staring at another door. Inside he saw Fred, alive, grinning, tossing a fireworks display into the air. "Blimey," Ron whispered. "I know it's a trick, but it feels so real." Hermione stood still, her own temptation before her. The Hogwarts library, endless and perfect, shelves filled with books that no human had ever written, knowledge beyond imagination. For a long moment she did not move. Then she closed her eyes and turned away. No illusions, no more lies. Harry nodded. "We find the real door." The corridor was collapsing now, doors fading, walls folding inward like paper. At the far end, faint but unmistakable, a single door remained. It was simple, wooden, unmarked, and unadorned, but around its frame shimmered a faint, steady light, the same warm glow that had once come from the golden key. Harry ran toward it, the others close behind. The floor shook, chunks of ceiling falling, as the Hollow's voice rose in a low, keening wail. The ghosts were fading, one by one, their forms drifting upward into the darkness like stars, returning to the night sky. As they reached the door, Harry turned back one last time. The hotel was crumbling into mist, its grand halls fading into memory. For a moment, he thought he saw Corvinus Gaunt, standing among the ruins, watching them go. The ghost inclined his head in silent acknowledgement. Then, with a final shudder, the Hollow began to fall. Harry grasped the doorknob and pulled it open. Blinding light spilled through, warm and golden, flooding the corridor. He took a breath, feeling the air hum with freedom and life. Behind him, Hermione whispered, "Home." Together they stepped through. Wind struck his face, cool and real. The scent of heather and rain filled his lungs. They stood once again on the misty hillside of the Scottish Highlands. Behind them, the Eldritch Hollow Hotel was gone. Only an empty stretch of grass remained, untouched and silent. Ron exhaled shakily. Well, that was a night to remember. Hermione looked down at the golden key in her hand. It had turned to dust. Harry gazed at the horizon where dawn was breaking, soft light spilling across the moor. "It's over," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, He couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, deep within that vanished place, a trace of it still lingered, a whisper in the wind, a flicker of regret that would never fully fade. And as the first sunlight touched the land, the last echoes of the hollow slipped away, carried into the morning mist. The morning that followed their return was gray and hushed, as if the world itself were reluctant to stir. Clouds rolled low over the highlands, their bellies heavy with rain, and the air still carried the strange, hollow quiet of a place where magic had just died. Harry stood alone on the slope, the grass wet beneath his boots, his cloak fluttering in the wind. Behind him, Hermione and Ron were speaking with the ministry team that had arrived at dawn, observers and field magi, who looked both bewildered and wary of what they could not see. There was no trace of the hotel, no rubble, no foundation, not even disturbed soil. Only a faint circle of scorched earth marked where the eldritch hollow had stood. The ministry wizards were taking readings, muttering charms, waving their wands in wide, cautious arcs. But the air held no enchantment now. Whatever had lived there was gone, and yet Harry couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. Not hostile, not threatening, just aware. A memory that refused to fade. Hermione approached, her hair tousled by the wind. "They can't detect any residual spell work," she said quietly. "The field is clean. Whatever the hollow was, is completely unraveled." Ron joined them, shoving his hands into his coat pockets. "So we can all agree never to spend another night investigating suspicious hotels, right?" Harry gave a small smile, though his eyes were distant. "I'll drink to that." But Hermione wasn't smiling. "Harry," she said, lowering her voice, "something doesn't fit. The structure we saw, it was too advanced. Time-binding enchantments of that magnitude shouldn't even work anymore. They were banned centuries ago. There's no record of anyone in the Gaunt line possessing that level of mastery." "Except Voldemort," said Harry. "Yes, but he never used it. Corvinus must have found something older, something beyond our understanding. I think the hollow wasn't just his creation. It might have been waiting, long before he tried to control it." Harry glanced toward the empty field again. "Then we were standing inside a curse older than him." Hermione nodded gravely. "A relic of magic's first age, perhaps. The kind of spell that remembers every soul it touches." Ron grimaced. "Well, let's hope it forgets ours." They returned to London by noon, apparating directly into the Auror headquarters. The bustle of the ministry greeted them, quills scratching, parchment shuffling, the faint rumble of fireplaces. After the night's horrors, it felt almost too normal, too safe. Kingsley Shacklebolt was waiting in the Auror office when they arrived. His tall figure loomed behind his desk, his calm gaze resting on the three of them as they entered. "Welcome back," he said, his deep voice steady. "I trust the situation in Scotland is contained." Harry nodded. "It's over. The hotel's gone. We found the cause, an old gaunt enchantment, bound to a temporal rift. Hermione neutralized it." Kingsley inclined his head toward her. Impressive as always. Hermione flushed slightly. "It wasn't without help." Ron leaned against the wall. "More like without sleep." Kingsley's expression softened. "I'll have the area sealed and monitored for residual magic, but from what you describe, it sounds as though the hollow destroyed itself once the core was broken." Harry hesitated. "It didn't just destroy itself, it chose to end. Gaunt's ghost helped us in the end. He wanted peace." Kingsley's dark eyes met his. Even the cursed seek rest eventually. He paused, then added quietly, "You've done well. Go home. Get some rest. I'll handle the paperwork." Ron exhaled in relief. Now that's the best thing anyone said all day. That night, the wind swept across the streets of London, carrying the scent of rain and soot. The city lights shimmered faintly through the mist, and the Thames flowed dark and slow beneath the bridges. Harry walked alone, his hands deep in his coat pockets, his thoughts heavy. The others had gone home. Hermione to her quiet house in Hampstead, Ron to his family's laughter and warmth, but Harry had wandered instead, drawn by something he couldn't name. He found himself near Grimold Place before he even realized where his feet were leading him. The old house loomed from the fog, blackened and familiar. When he entered, the air smelled of old wood and dust. Creature, long since freed but still loyal, had left a small fire burning in the hearth. Harry sank into the chair beside it, staring at the flames. The light danced across the room, flickering over the photographs on the mantel. Friends, family, faces both living and gone. For a moment he thought of the Hollow again, of its whispering walls and shifting shadows, of Gaunt's final words. Some regrets cling like ivy. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm not feeding you anymore," he murmured to the memory of the place. "You can fade now." The fire crackled softly in answer, but even as he sat there, his mind refused to settle. He could still feel the faint pulse of the key Hermione had used, the golden glow that had burned through the Hollow's heart. A part of that magic had touched him, he was sure of it. He remembered the flash of light when the curse broke, the way the energy had surged through him like a heartbeat. And deep within his robes, something stirred. He reached into his pocket and drew out a small fragment of metal, a splinter no larger than a coin, dull and harmless looking. He must have picked it up without realizing when the Hollow collapsed, but now as he turned it in his hand, it caught the firelight and shimmered faintly gold. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard something faint, like a whisper just beyond hearing. Still watching? He froze. The whisper faded, but the light did not. It pulsed once, slow and deliberate, as if breathing. Harry's jaw tightened. He rose and crossed to the old glass cabinet where he kept the relics of past cases, spent wands, cursed trinkets, recovered artifacts. He opened the lowest drawer, placed the fragment inside, and sealed it with a quiet spell. "Not tonight," he muttered. "You stay there." Then he turned back to the fire, letting its warmth drive the chill from his bones. The night stretched on, and the city outside whispered with the sound of rain against the windows. When at last sleep claimed him, it was shallow and restless. Far away, beneath the quiet hills of the Highlands, where the ground still bore faint scars of the vanished hotel, something stirred in the earth. A faint tremor rippled through the soil. The air shimmered for an instant, and a thin thread of golden light flickered briefly before fading again into darkness. It was not the Hollow reborn, not yet, but something of it remained, like a seed waiting for the right season to grow. And in that deep silence, far from all human eyes, a soft, echoing voice whispered across the empty moor, "The Hollow remembers." The wind rose, carrying the sound away. Back in London, Harry shifted in his sleep, his brow furrowing as though he'd heard it too. The faintest gleam of gold pulsed once within the sealed drawer, and then was still. but beyond the reach of wand or will, deep within the fabric of time itself, a faint shimmer coiled and whispered a new, an unfinished story, waiting for its hour to return. A week passed before the strange unease began again. London moved as it always did. Rain against the cobblestones, carriages rumbling invisibly in the muggle streets above, and the golden gleam of fireplaces flashing in the ministry's corridors. Yet beneath the rhythm of ordinary days, Harry felt something shifting, faint as the pull of a distant tide. He told no one at first. Ron and Hermione had returned to their regular duties. Both seemed glad to set the Highlands behind them. But Harry could not forget the whisper in the dark, nor the golden shard lying sealed within his cabinet. Each night he thought he heard it again, not as a voice, but as a rhythm, a heartbeat, slow, patient, and alive. By the seventh evening, it became impossible to ignore. He was reading reports in his office when a sudden draft swept through the room, though no window was open. The lamp flickered once, twice, then steadied, but its flame now glowed pale gold instead of orange. Harry set down the parchment. "No," he whispered, "you're not real." But the air shimmered, and before him, the shape of a door appeared, not solid but woven from light, the outline of the same wooden door he had last seen within the hollow. For a moment he thought it would open, then it vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of lilac and dust. Harry rose abruptly. The cabinet drawer was glowing. He unlocked it with a flick of his wand. Inside, the fragment of gold shimmered fiercely, pulsing like a living ember. For a heartbeat he thought he saw movement within its reflection, the faint outline of a corridor, candles flickering, and something walking toward him. Through mist, before he could react, the door burst open. "Harry!" Hermione's voice cut through the haze. She stood at the threshold holding a stack of papers, but froze when she saw the light. "What? Merlin's sake, what is that?" Harry snapped the drawer shut, the glow dimming instantly. "Leftover magic. From the hollow." Her eyes narrowed. "You said it was gone." "I thought it was." Hermione set the papers down and crossed to him, her face pale. "Harry, that kind of magic doesn't just fade. If any fragment of the core survived..." "I know," he said quietly. "I think it's calling." "Calling?" He hesitated. "I've been dreaming about it. Every night since we left. The halls, the whispering, the clock stuck at midnight. It feels unfinished." Hermione stared at him for a long moment. "Then it isn't over." Ron arrived the next morning, bleary-eyed and carrying 2 mugs of tea. When Hermione told him, he groaned. "You mean we've got another cursed hotel on our hands?" "Brilliant." Harry shook his head. "Not a hotel, a remnant. I think the Hollow's magic attached itself to the fragment. It wants something, maybe to return." Ron looked grim. "And I'm guessing we don't want that." They gathered in the Auror archives beneath the low hum of enchanted lamps. Hermione spread several scrolls across the table, ancient brittle documents written in spidery script. "I've been researching Corvinus Gaunt," she explained. "His experiments in time magic were based on older theories, pre-HOGWARTS era. There's mention of a spell called Eternum Vinculum, the eternal binding. It was used to tie a soul to a place. If the soul was strong enough, the magic could survive even after the caster's death." Harry frowned. "So Gaunt's spirit anchored the hollow. When we broke it..." Hermione nodded. "The soul split. Fragments could have latched onto the nearest magical source. In this case, the key and whatever residue was in the air. When it collapsed..." Ron leaned back in his chair. So what do we do? Smash it again? Hermione's tone turned sharp. If you destroy it carelessly, it could release whatever's left. We have to find a way to neutralize it properly. Harry ran a hand through his hair. Then we find out where it's trying to go. That night, he dreamt again. He stood once more in the corridor of the Eldritch Hollow. The air was heavy with lilac and smoke. The portraits whispered as before, their eyes following him as he walked. But this time there was no fear, only familiarity, as though the place remembered him, waiting patiently for his return. A bell tolled. Midnight. The mirrors lining the hall shimmered, and from within them Corvinus Gaunt appeared. His form was weaker, translucent as frost on glass. "You returned," he said softly. Harry stared at him. "I didn't want to." Gaunt's expression was unreadable. "No one ever does. The hollow endures because sorrow endures. You carry it still. Why call me back? What do you want?" "To finish what began." Gaunt stepped closer. The spell that created the hollow was never meant to trap the living. It was meant to preserve time itself, to keep one perfect moment from dying. But to do so requires a willing keeper, someone the hollow will obey. Harry's pulse quickened. "And you think that's me?" "You broke its chains. It recognizes your power. Without a keeper, it will fade into chaos and take everything bound to it along. The souls you freed, the memories, even me." The words echoed strangely, carrying weight beyond sound. Harry felt the walls shudder with them. "I can't," he said. "I won't rebuild that place." Gaunt's gaze softened. "You misunderstand. I ask not for power, but for peace. The hollow is a wound. You can close it." Before Harry could answer, the corridor trembled. A golden light spilled through the cracks in the floor. The same light that had once devoured the hotel. It rose around him like a tide, pulling him backward. "Remember this," Gaunt said, his voice fading. "Every curse is born from longing. Heal the longing, and the curse will die." Harry woke with a start. His room was dark, but the golden glow was there, seeping faintly from beneath his door. He rose quickly, wand in hand, and opened it. The corridor beyond was not the hallway of Grimmauld Place. It was stone, old, cold, and familiar. Candles flickered along the walls. He had been drawn into the dream's shadow, except now it was real. "Hermione!" he shouted, but the name vanished into silence. He followed the light, down turning corridors that bent and twisted until they led into a circular chamber. In its center stood the clock from the hollow, restored and perfect. Its hands, still fixed at midnight, trembled faintly. On the floor before it lay the fragment, the same piece of gold from his cabinet. It pulsed once, and the sound that came from it was unmistakable. A heartbeat, echoing through stone and air alike. He approached slowly. "What are you trying to show me?" The light brightened, and suddenly he saw them. The ghosts who had been trapped before, standing in silence around the chamber. The receptionist, the little girl, dozens of others. They were not solid now, but peaceful, their faces calm. The girl stepped forward, her voice soft as snow. "You freed us, but one chain remains." "What chain?" Harry asked. She pointed toward the clock. "The keeper." The clock began to chime, though no hand moved. Each toll rang through his bones. The air split open with light, and for one blinding instant Harry saw everything. The hollow, whole and bright, suspended between seconds. Time itself frozen in that single impossible moment. And then he understood. The hollow was not merely a curse, it was a sanctuary for what could not let go. And the keeper it sought was not to control it, but to guide it, to ensure it never awakened again. "I understand," he whispered. "It's not meant to live. It's meant to rest." He raised his wand, the light reflecting in his eyes. Somnus Eternus, eternal sleep. The spell struck the clock like a blade of silver fire. The heartbeat ceased. The chamber shuddered once, then stilled. When Harry opened his eyes again, he was back in his room. The fragment lay in his hand, dull and lifeless at last. Outside, the rain began to fall softly. Steady, cleansing, final, and somewhere in the depths of the world, the hollow dreamed no more. For several weeks, peace returned, or so it seemed. The air of London felt lighter. The Aurors office hummed with its usual rhythm, and even the endless reports stacked upon Harry's desk no longer filled him with dread. Yet somewhere deep within, a restlessness lingered, faint and insistent. Like a half-remembered tune, one cannot stop humming. At first, Harry dismissed it as fatigue. After all, how many times had he sworn that the worst was behind him? But fate, as he well knew, had a curious way of whispering back whenever he tried to forget. It began with small things, shadows that moved against the light, clocks that paused for the briefest instant before striking the hour, a faint shimmer in the air when he passed certain mirrors, though nothing ever reflected wrong, and always the same soft scent of lilac. He tried to ignore it until the morning the newspapers arrived. Hermione brought them to his desk with her usual brisk efficiency. "You'll want to see this," she said, sliding the Daily Prophet toward him. The headline read, "Mysterious Hotel Appears in France and Vanishes Again at Dawn." Harry's stomach tightened. Beneath the bold print was a photograph, a building of black stone and ivy, its windows flickering with ghostly light. The sign above the entrance swung in the wind, half hidden, but he could still make out the name. The Eldritch Hollow. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Ron said quietly, "You destroyed it, didn't you?" Harry's voice was flat. "I thought I did." Hermione leaned closer, scanning the article. It appeared near a Muggle village outside Rouen. Locals thought it was an abandoned manor, but several wizards entered to investigate. None of them remember what happened inside. They woke hours later in the fields. No injuries, but disoriented. Ron frowned. "No one missing this time?" "No," Hermione replied, though her brow was furrowed. "But the description matches exactly. Even the inscription over the door, 'Guests Welcome.'" Harry folded the paper slowly. Then it wasn't destroyed. It moved. Hermione looked troubled. Or it rebuilt itself, piece by piece. He could still feel the shard in his memory, the warmth of it fading in his palm as the hollow fell. He had believed he'd ended it, sealed it into eternal sleep. But perhaps sleep was not the same as death. That night, he couldn't rest. The image of the hotel haunted him, the tall windows glowing like watchful eyes, the corridors whispering just beyond hearing. At last, near midnight, he rose and went to his study. The drawer where he had sealed the golden fragment remained locked. Yet when he opened it, the air around it felt different. No longer cold, but humming faintly, as though something within had been listening. The shard was gone. A chill swept through him. He searched the drawer, the cabinet, the floor. Nothing, not even dust. It had vanished as cleanly as if it had never been. He straightened slowly, his hand tightening around his wand. "You followed me back," he murmured into the dark. "Didn't you?" The house creaked softly in reply. By dawn, he was standing outside Hermione's house. She opened the door in her dressing gown, hair tousled, eyes already alert with concern. "You felt it too?" she said simply. Harry nodded. "It's awake." She stepped aside to let him in, summoning a pot of tea with a flick of her wand. "I checked the residual energies at the site in Scotland last night. There's movement in the ley lines. The Hollow's magic is spreading. It's not bound to one place anymore. It's using existing magical paths to travel. Like a parasite," said Harry, "or a curse with no anchor." She poured tea into his cup, her hands trembling slightly. It could be searching for a new heart, a new focus to bind itself, focus to, if it's rebuilding, someone might already be caught within it. Ron arrived later, pale and still half-dressed, clutching a bacon sandwich. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "We're dealing with a cursed hotel that doesn't stay put. You sure we shouldn't just burn the whole countryside and call it done?" Hermione glared at him. "It's not that simple. The Hollow draws from emotion, not matter. Destroying the ground won't kill it. We need to sever the magic at its source." Harry nodded. "Then we follow it." He met Hermione's eyes across the table. "How soon can we get to France?" "An hour," she said. "I've already contacted the French ministry." The countryside outside Rouen was quiet when they arrived. Green fields, rolling beneath a pale sky. Dew clung to the grass, glittering faintly in the morning light. Birds sang somewhere distant. Nothing about the place hinted at darkness. And yet, as they drew nearer to the valley, described in the reports, the air changed, the birds fell silent, the mist thickened, and there, half hidden among the trees, stood the building, the eldritch hollow, exactly as before. Harry felt his breath catch. "It's identical." Hermione nodded grimly. "No reconstruction could be that perfect. It's the same structure, reforming itself through magic." They approached the front gate. The ironwork was twisted into strange shapes, symbols that seemed to shift when one wasn't looking. A faint hum filled the air. "Same rules as before," Harry said. "No splitting up. And if we see anything that looks too good to be true, it probably is." Ron finished. The door swung open as they reached it. The same cold scent of lilac drifted out, sweet and ghostly. They stepped inside. The lobby looked just as it had the night of their first encounter. The same grand chandelier, the same crimson carpets. Only now the paintings on the walls were unfamiliar. The faces that stared from their frames were not strangers, but people Harry recognized. Members of the Auror office, Kingsley, even Hermione and Ron. "What?" Ron began, but Hermione's voice was tight with alarm. "It's evolving. It's learning from us." Harry turned slowly. Behind the reception desk stood the pale woman again, her gray eyes bright as stormlight, but her voice, when she spoke, was different. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter." Harry froze. "You remember me?" A faint smile curved her lips. "The Hollow remembers everything it touches. You set it free, and now it seeks completion." "Completion?" "To become whole." She inclined her head slightly. "A sanctuary for all who cannot rest." "We destroyed the heart," Harry said. "It can't exist without it." "Oh, but it can," she whispered. "When you cast your final spell, you created a new heart, one made of mercy." The golden light flickered faintly around her. "The Hollow chose you, Harry Potter. You are its keeper now." The floor trembled. The air grew thick with power. From every direction came the sound of doors unlocking, hinges groaning. Corridors stretched outward, branching infinitely. The walls pulsed faintly, alive. Hermione seized his arm. "Harry, whatever happens, don't listen to it. It's manipulating you." But he barely heard her. Somewhere beyond the lobby, he could hear footsteps. Soft, steady, familiar. A voice called his name, distant but unmistakable, Ginny. The air shimmered. A door at the far end of the hall opened just a crack, golden light spilling through. Ron shouted, "Harry, wait!" But the sound was already fading. The world bent, the floor tilting as though reality itself had begun to unravel. Harry took a step forward. The hollow seemed to breathe, whispering through every corridor, every wall, every flickering candle. "Welcome home." The golden light filled Harry's vision until the edges of the world dissolved into brilliance. When the glow faded, he stood not in the lobby but in a narrow hallway lined with doors, each one slightly ajar, each one whispering faintly, as if something within breathed softly against the crack. The air was still and cold, yet beneath it pulsed a rhythm too slow for a heartbeat and too heavy for the wind. The hollow was alive again, and this time it was not content to be silent. He took another step, his wand drawn, its tip glowing faintly. "Ginny?" he called. His voice echoed, swallowed by the dark. There was no reply, only the soft creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. From somewhere behind him came a faint voice. "Harry!" He turned sharply. Hermione and Ron were running toward him, their wands lit. The hall behind them seemed to twist like a serpent, stretching and folding as they approached, but somehow they reached him. Hermione's face was pale. "Don't answer it when it calls," she warned breathlessly. "It's using memories now. The hollow's drawing from your thoughts. It's showing you what you most want to see." Harry's grip tightened. "Then it's inside my mind." "Inside all our minds," said Ron grimly. "It's different this time. Feels like it's thinking." They stood for a moment in the flickering half-light, listening to the faint murmur of voices around them, hundreds of whispers overlapping like waves against a shore. The walls pulsed faintly in rhythm, as though the entire structure were breathing. Hermione gestured towards the far end of the corridor. "We need to reach the source. If it's rebuilt itself, it must have anchored to something, or someone. If it chose Harry, then that's where the connection lies." Harry nodded, though a hollow weight had settled in his chest. He had thought himself free of the place, free of its strange allure. But now the air itself seemed to hum with familiarity. He could feel the magic brushing against him, curious, almost tender. They moved deeper into the hotel. The hall opened into a grand stairway lined with silver sconces. The candles burned with pale blue flames that gave no warmth. As they climbed, the silence deepened, pressing close against them. At the landing stood a tall mirror framed in ornate gold. It showed not their reflections, but scenes from their lives. The burrow at Christmas, the great hall lit for the Yule Ball, the battle at Hogwarts. Each memory shimmered for an instant, then faded, replaced by another. Ron muttered, "I don't like that one bit." Hermione's gaze lingered on one of the images, a younger version of herself, sitting in the Hogwarts library, parchment spread before her, sunlight streaming through the windows. Her expression softened for just a moment before she tore her eyes away. "It's feeding on nostalgia. Every memory we watch makes it stronger." Harry raised his wand. "Then we stop watching." He muttered an incantation under his breath. The mirror shattered with a crack like thunder, and for a moment the air screamed, high and piercing like the wail of something in pain. Then silence again. The shards dissolved into mist. When the sound faded, they realized they were no longer on the staircase. The world had shifted around them. They stood now in what looked like a ballroom, vast and shadowed. The floor was polished marble, reflecting the light of ghostly chandeliers that floated above. Dozens of figures stood frozen in place, spectral dancers mid-step, their faces half-formed, their eyes hollow. Hermione whispered, "They're echoes, memories from the curse." Ron stared. Then why are they all looking at him? Every ghostly head had turned toward Harry. The air rippled as the figures began to move, slow and graceful, their feet gliding across the floor. A waltz began, soft, eerie, the music rising from nowhere. The dancers circled closer, the rhythm swelling until the sound filled every corner of the room. Harry stepped back, his heart hammering. "What do you want from me?" One of the dancers broke from the circle. She glided forward, her face resolving into that of the pale woman from the reception desk. Her gray eyes shone faintly in the candlelight. "The hollow remembers its promise," she said. "You were the one who gave it peace. Now it seeks only your acceptance." "I didn't build you," said Harry, his voice low. "No," she replied, "but you ended us with mercy. You granted what even time could not give, release. That act bound you to the hollow. It cannot exist without you now." Hermione's hand clenched around her wand. "He's not your vessel." The woman's smile deepened, pitying and calm. "You misunderstand. The hollow does not want to harm him. It wishes to become him, to live through him, to remember the world as it was before sorrow consumed it. A place within his heart, nothing more." Ron barked a laugh. "Nothing more. That's exactly what the cursed diary said before it nearly killed him." The woman turned her head toward him, her expression unchanging. "Every curse is born from longing, Mr. Weasley, and longing cannot be destroyed, only transformed." The music swelled, the walls trembled, the chandeliers flared brighter, spilling gold across the room. Harry felt it then, a slow, insistent warmth creeping through him, like sunlight under the skin. It wasn't pain, not yet, but it was spreading, drawing him inward, tethering his thoughts to the rhythm of the waltz. He could see fragments of memory spinning around him, the laughter of his children, the glow of Ginny's smile, the flicker of Dumbledore's office, the rush of wind on his first broomstick ride. The hollow was showing him everything he loved, everything that made him human, and within that beauty was the quiet whisper, "Stay, rest. You deserve it." For a heartbeat he wanted to. Hermione's voice cut through the haze, sharp and desperate. "Harry, listen to me. It's not peace. It's surrender. It's trying to keep you here forever." The warmth turned cold. The golden light darkened to crimson. The dancers froze. The woman's smile faded into something like sorrow. "You cannot fight what you are," she murmured. "You were always the keeper." "No," Harry said quietly. "Not anymore." He raised his wand. "Finite Tempest!" The spell burst outward, shattering the illusions. The ghosts wailed, dissolving into wisps of mist. The chandeliers fell like dying stars, crashing against the floor. The music twisted into silence. When the smoke cleared, they stood once more in darkness. The ballroom was gone. Only the faint sound of a clock, ticking somewhere distant, remained. Hermione steadied herself. "You broke its hold for now." Ron exhaled shakily. "Please tell me we're close to finishing this thing off." Harry looked toward the sound of the ticking clock. Not yet, but it's weaker. They followed the sound through a long corridor that seemed to narrow with every step. The air grew colder, heavier. At last, they entered a small chamber lit by a single candle. Upon a pedestal in the center rested a glass sphere faintly pulsing with light. Inside it swirled a tiny vision, the image of the hotel itself, endless and looping, forever rebuilding. Hermione whispered, "The new heart." Harry stepped forward. "Then this is where it ends." He lifted his wand. For a moment the sphere's light flared, bright as dawn. Then from within it a voice spoke, not Gaunt's, not the woman's, but something older, deeper, carrying the weight of centuries. "You can destroy me," it said, "but you will destroy all I hold, the lost, the forgotten, the memories that gave you strength. Are you ready to live without them?" The light dimmed, leaving only silence. Harry's hand trembled. Around him, the faces of the dead seemed to hover in the darkness. Fred, Dobby, Lupin, Tonks, all the souls the Hollow claimed to remember. Hermione touched his shoulder. "It's your choice." He looked at her, then at Ron, then at the sphere. "They'll never be gone," he said softly. "They live in us, not in this." And with a steady hand, he brought his wand down. Ex solvo aeternum. The sphere shattered, and with it the world began to fall apart. Light poured from every wall, every floorboard, every breath of air. The Hollow screamed, not in rage, but in release. When the brilliance faded, there was only silence. And then, for the first time in many years, true dawn broke over the world. The dawn after the Hollow's fall was sharp and cold. Frost clung to the window panes of the inn where they had taken refuge, and the early sun cut through the mist in pale, uncertain blades of light. For a long time Harry sat by the window without speaking, watching the clouds turn from silver to gold. It was the quiet that unsettled him most. After nights filled with whispers and trembling walls, true silence felt like something strange and fragile, as though the world itself were afraid to breathe too loudly. Hermione entered the room softly, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her face pale from exhaustion. She carried a steaming mug in one hand and a worn parchment in the other. "You didn't sleep," she said. Harry shook his head. "Couldn't. I keep hearing it. The Hollow fading, like the sound of the sea when you walk away." She sat across from him, setting the parchment between them. "That's because it isn't entirely gone." His eyes lifted sharply. "What do you mean?" Hermione unrolled the parchment, revealing a map of magical ley lines stretching across Europe. Ancient networks of power drawn in shimmering ink. After we destroyed the heart, the French ministry recorded an energy surge across the northern lines. It's dispersing, but pieces of the Hollow's magic still move through the currents. Not sentient anymore, just residue, the echo of something that once was. Harry studied the faint gold markings. "So, it's finally dying, or sleeping," Hermione said. "Perhaps forever, perhaps not." Her voice softened. "Magic like that? It doesn't vanish completely. It leaves fingerprints, stories." Ron appeared in the doorway, his hair sticking out wildly and his coat half buttoned. "Did I hear right? We finished it, but it's still haunting the plumbing of Europe?" Hermione smiled faintly. "In essence," he groaned. "Brilliant. Remind me why we didn't just become shopkeepers." But the joke fell flat. The memory of what they had faced was too near, too real. Even Ron's grin could not dispel the weight in the air. They left the inn by mid-morning. The valley where the hollow had stood was empty, nothing but grass and frost. No trace of foundation, no charred stones, no broken signs. Only a faint circular imprint in the soil marked where the curse had rooted itself. The wind moved softly across it, whispering through the reeds. Hermione knelt and placed her hand against the earth. "It's calm," she murmured. "The ground feels whole again." Ron kicked a small clump of dirt. "Good riddance to the thing." Harry said nothing. He was staring at the horizon, where the faint shimmer of morning mist blurred the line between land and sky. He couldn't shake the thought that somewhere beyond that veil, something was still watching. They returned to London that night. The ministry greeted them with quiet applause and relieved smiles. Reports were written, artifacts catalogued, forms signed in triplicate. The world, as it always did, tried to return to normal. But Harry felt detached from it all, as though part of him still stood in that endless corridor, listening to a heartbeat that was not his own. After the paperwork was done, Kingsley called him into his office. The minister's deep voice carried its usual calm authority. "You did what few could, Harry, but you look as though you left more behind than a curse." Harry managed a thin smile. "It's strange, sir. I thought destroying it would feel like victory, but it feels more like closing a door on something that understood too much." Kingsley regarded him quietly for a moment. "Every dark thing you face teaches you something about light. You know that better than most." He reached into his desk and handed Harry a small black notebook. "Keep your notes. You never know when old wounds decide to whisper again." Harry took it and nodded. "Thank you." As he left the office, he caught a glimpse of himself reflected in the glass door. Tired eyes, lined with weariness but still bright. The look of a man who had fought too long with things unseen. Days turned to weeks. The ministry moved on to new cases, new dangers. Hermione dove back into her research. Ron returned to field duty, and the world resumed its slow turning. Yet every now and then Harry caught a flicker in the edge of his vision, a glint of gold, the brief scent of lilac on the wind, always gone by the time he turned to look. One evening, as the city fell quiet under winter rain, he visited the graveyard on the hill outside Godric's Hollow. Snow lay light upon the stones, untouched and pure. He stood before the headstones of his parents, the silence broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. "I think I understand now," he said softly. "Why Gaunt tried to hold on to time. It's hard to let things go even when we must." A gust of wind stirred his cloak. For a moment he imagined he heard a voice. Not a whisper, but something gentler, a breath of gratitude carried through the cold air. The hollow's last echo, perhaps, fading at last. He closed his eyes, letting the peace settle. Then he turned back toward the village lights, the warmth of the living world calling him home. But elsewhere, far from the quiet streets of England, another story was unfolding. In a narrow valley deep within the Pyrenees, a shepherd paused on his morning route. The mist was thick, curling low over the grass, and his dog whined uneasily beside him. The shepherd frowned. There had been no buildings here the day before, and yet now, through the fog, he could see the outline of one. Tall, dark, and silent. He took a cautious step closer. The structure stood where none had stood before. Ivy-clad, its windows glimmering faintly, as if reflecting a light from another world. The sign above the door swung lazily in the wind. The shepherd squinted. The letters were almost worn away, but he could just make them out. The Eldritch Hollow. Guests welcome. The dog began to bark, straining against its leash. The man's breath clouded in the cold air, and as he stared, one of the windows flared briefly with golden light, a heartbeat in the dark. When the mist shifted again, the hotel was gone. Back in London, Harry woke with a start, his heart pounding. The dream had been so vivid, the mist, the door, the sign swinging. He sat up, rubbing his face, and for a moment he thought he heard rain tapping against the window. But when he looked, it wasn't rain, it was frost. Words traced faintly on the glass, written by an unseen hand. Every story leaves an echo. He stared at it, the letters glimmering pale in the moonlight, and then slowly he smiled. Then let it echo, he whispered, let it fade the right way. The frost melted, the glass cleared. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of wand or will, a shadow of the hollow drifted once more into slumber. Not cursed, not cruel, but quiet, at peace at last. And the world turned gently toward dawn, its light breaking over London's spires, soft and gold, as if time itself had finally exhaled. The frost upon the window faded by morning, leaving behind only the pale outline of dawn. London stirred below, ordinary and unaware of what had nearly returned to life. The bells of St. Paul's tolled faintly through the mist as Harry dressed, the echo of their sound mingling with the soft creak of the old house. He paused before the mirror, his reflection watching him with a strange stillness. For an instant he thought he saw the faint shimmer of gold behind his own eyes. But when he blinked, it was gone. Grimmauld Place was quiet now, gentler than it had been in years. Creature had long since retired to his rest, and the portrait of Mrs. Black had been permanently silenced by Hermione's charm work. Only the ticking of the hall clock broke the silence. It was a comforting sound, yet even it reminded him of the hollow's eternal tolling. He sighed and stepped out into the winter air. The city was wrapped in a thin fog that softened every sound, and for a while Harry allowed himself to blend with the quiet. The war was long over, the world had rebuilt itself, but peace had always felt to him like the moment between breaths, fragile, waiting to be broken. The ministry had called for him that morning. A routine assignment, they said. A disturbance reported by a wizarding family in Cornwall. Lights in the cliffs. Strange echoes underground. Normally he would have sent one of the younger Aurors, but something about the message had tugged at him. He apparated to the seaside just before noon. The wind whipped across the cliffs, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of salt and kelp. The sky hung low, streaked with gray. The family's cottage stood on the edge of the rocks, its chimney puffing thin smoke into the stormy air. A woman met him at the door, her eyes lined with worry. "Mr. Potter," she said quickly, clutching her shawl. "It's my husband. He works the mines beneath the cliff. He said the tunnels began to sing last night." Harry frowned. "Sing?" "Aye," she whispered, low and deep, like voices from another world. And when he listened too long, he saw a door in the stone. The words chilled him. "A door?" She nodded, her hand trembling. "He said it was golden." Harry's pulse quickened. He thanked her and followed the narrow path down toward the cliffs. The sea roared below, crashing against jagged rocks that gleamed wet in the thin light. The entrance to the mine was half hidden behind a tumble of slate and bramble. He ducked inside, wand lit, the beam of light cutting through the gloom. The tunnels twisted downward, slick with salt water and the faint glimmer of minerals. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. Soon even the sea's voice was lost, replaced by the soft drip of water from the stone ceiling. Then faintly came the hum. It was not quite a sound, more a vibration, a thrum that shivered through the rock and into his bones. It was beautiful and terrible at once, a note that seemed to hold memory within it. As he descended, the walls around him began to shimmer faintly, dust motes catching light where none should be. And then he saw it. At the end of the passage, carved into the living stone, was a doorway of gold. Not metal, not magic as he knew it, but something older, light shaped into form. Its surface rippled like the surface of a lake, and faintly within it, he saw reflections of another place, a grand hallway, chandeliers burning blue-white, and the faint scent of lilac drifting through the air. The hollow, he whispered. The word itself seemed to stir the air. The light pulsed once, as if in recognition. A voice drifted from behind him. You feel it too. Harry spun. A man stood there, tall, bearded, with soot on his face and fear in his eyes. The miner, no doubt. His hands trembled as he pointed toward the door. It called to me, he said hoarsely. Said there were others inside. Said I could see them again. Harry's stomach clenched. Don't listen, it lies. But the man's eyes filled with tears. My son died in these tunnels last winter. It sounded like him. It was him. The light brightened and Harry heard it too. A child's laughter, soft and distant, echoing from within the golden glow. He stepped forward, wand raised. Show yourself, he commanded. The laughter stopped. The door rippled once more, and from its depths, a shape began to emerge. Faint at first, then clearer. The face that formed was not a child's, but that of Corvinus Gaunt. You cannot destroy longing, Harry Potter, said the ghostly figure. You buried the hollow, but you did not end it. The world itself remembers what it has lost. Every heart that grieves gives it breath anew. Harry's wand flared. You're a memory, nothing more. Memory, said Gaunt, his voice soft as silk. And what is memory, if not the echo of eternity? Look. The light from the door swelled, flooding the tunnel. Harry staggered back, shielding his eyes. When the brilliance dimmed, he saw not stone, but sky. Endless twilight, stretching in all directions. The hollow had not vanished, it had changed. It was no longer a building, but a realm. Woven through time, fed by the world's sorrow. The miner stood, transfixed beside him. He's there, the man whispered. My boy, he's waiting. Don't, Harry warned, but the man was already stepping forward. He reached for the golden surface, and it welcomed him. His form dissolved into the light, his voice fading with a sigh of relief. When he was gone, Harry stood alone. The door still shimmered, pulsing like a heartbeat. Gaunt's reflection lingered within it. Do you see now? The hollow is no curse. It is the refuge of the grieving. You, more than any, should understand its mercy. Harry's jaw tightened. Mercy built on pain isn't mercy, it's theft. The spirit smiled faintly. Then take your peace elsewhere, but the hollow will remain. As long as sorrow exists, it will find a place to dwell. The light dimmed. The doorway folded in upon itself, shrinking until only a faint gleam remained. A mark upon the rock, no bigger than a handprint. Then even that faded. Harry stood in the dark, the echoes of the sea returning around him. He raised his wand again, murmuring a sealing charm that would keep the tunnels closed. But as he traced the final sigil in the air, he hesitated. The hollow was gone, yes, but not destroyed. It had become something else, something beyond his reach. And for the first time, he wondered if that was how it was meant to be. When he emerged from the mine, the wind was rising, carrying the first hint of snow. The woman waited by the path, eyes searching his face. "It's over," Harry told her quietly. "You won't hear the voices again." She nodded, though her expression held something unreadable. "He's with our son now, isn't he?" Harry hesitated, then said softly, "He's at peace." She smiled faintly, tears glimmering. "Then that's enough." As she turned away, Harry looked once more toward the cliffs. The sea stretched endless and gray, but far on the horizon, he thought he saw a shimmer, a flicker of gold beneath the clouds, there for a moment, then gone. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Rest now." And somewhere, perhaps far beyond time, the hollow obeyed. The waves rolled on, endless and untroubled, washing the last traces of its song into silence. For many months after the incident on the Cornish cliffs, the world seemed to settle into a rare stillness. Winter melted slowly into spring, and the ministry declared the matter of the hollow conclusively resolved. Yet to Harry, peace never arrived as swiftly as others wished it to. Even when the sunlight grew warm upon the cobbled streets and the air of London carried the scent of blooming gardens, he felt a shadow moving quietly beneath the surface of things. A reminder that some silences were not endings, but breath held too long. The days passed in their ordinary rhythm. He trained new Aurors, answered letters, walked home through the alleys of Diagon, and watched the city lights flicker in the rain. The world no longer whispered with the hollow's voice, but every now and again, a memory of it would stir, an echo caught in reflection, a faint hum beneath the ticking of a clock. It no longer frightened him, but it never truly left. Ginny noticed first. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of their small cottage in Godric's Hollow, she set aside her quill and looked at him over the rim of her tea. "You're somewhere else again," she said softly. Harry smiled, weary and fond. "Just thinking about it," he nodded. "Sometimes I still see it, not clearly, just a shape, like fog in the corner of my mind. I wonder if I did the right thing, destroying it." Ginny's hand found his. "You freed the people it held. You gave them peace. That's enough." "Peace," he repeated, looking toward the horizon where twilight gathered. "Funny word, isn't it? Always sounds like it should be simple." She squeezed his hand, and he said nothing more. But when night fell, he dreamed again. He was walking through an endless field under a gray sky. The air was thick with mist, and the grass whispered softly around his boots. Far ahead, a faint light flickered, warm, golden, inviting. He followed it, though every step felt heavier than the last. The closer he drew, the clearer it became. A doorway standing alone in the fog, its frame carved with runes that shimmered faintly, its handle gleaming as if it waited for his touch. "Harry Potter." He turned. The voice was calm, echoing through the mist like wind through leaves. Corvinus Gaunt stood there, his ghostly form less distinct than before, his eyes softer. "I thought you were gone," Harry said. "You cannot erase what has become part of the world," Gaunt replied. "The hollow is no longer bound to place or stone. It drifts now between heartbeats, between memory and forgetting." "Then why call me back?" The ghost smiled faintly. "Because endings have meanings only if they are remembered." He gestured toward the door. "Would you see what remains?" Harry hesitated, but the air itself seemed to lean toward him. He reached for the handle. The instant his fingers touched the metal, the world dissolved. He stood once more in the grand lobby of the eldritch hollow. Yet it was different now, lighter, almost translucent. The chandeliers glowed softly, casting light that did not burn but warmed. The portraits no longer whispered. The air carried no fear, only stillness. The pale woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. "You came back." "I thought you were gone," he said again. "Gone?" Her laughter was like falling snow. "No, Mr. Potter, we are at rest. You freed us, remember? This is what remains when a curse forgets its hunger." He looked around. "Then this place is only memory," she finished. "A dream, caught in the edge of your mind. When you wake, it will fade." Harry turned slowly, taking in the beauty of it, the way light flowed like water across the marble floor, the way silence felt alive. "It's peaceful." She nodded. "That was all we ever wanted." From the staircase above, soft footsteps echoed. A child's laughter drifted down, bright and pure. The little girl appeared at the landing, her ghostly dress shimmering like mist. "The hollow remembers you," she said, smiling. "But now it remembers joy." Something in Harry's chest eased. "Then I'm glad," he whispered. Corvinus stood beside him once more, his form flickering. "You see now," he murmured, "the hollow was never meant as a prison. It was a reflection of us, of what we could not let go. You healed it by understanding." Harry met his gaze. "And you?" "I will fade," said Gaunt quietly, "but not in pain, in peace." He bowed his head slightly. "Thank you." A bell chimed softly. The light brightened, and Harry felt himself drifting, the world dissolving again into mist. He awoke just before dawn, the first gray light seeping through the curtains. The house was silent. Ginny still slept beside him, the faint rise and fall of her breath, steady as the tide. For the first time in months, his heart felt light. He rose, dressed quietly, and stepped outside. The fields glistened with dew, and far above, a pale crescent moon hung fading in the morning sky. He stood there for a long while listening, not for voices or whispers, but for the stillness itself, and then he heard it, a faint note carried on the wind, soft and distant, not sorrowful but serene, the hollow's final song. Years later, the story of the cursed hotel became little more than a whisper among Aurors, an odd legend retold in low voices by candlelight. The records described it as a containment of temporal magic, gone awry, long since neutralized. Only a few believed the truth that it had been something far older, something born not of dark intent, but of human longing. Harry never spoke of it again. The golden shard remained sealed in the ministry archives, inert and harmless. Yet on rare nights when the moonlight touched its glass case, those who passed by swore they could see a faint glow within, a pulse like a sleeping heart. On one such night, a young trainee paused before the artifact, curiosity lighting her eyes. She leaned closer, tracing a finger over the plaque. Recovered by Auror Harry James Potter, 2008. "Strange thing," she murmured. "Doesn't look dangerous at all." The light within the shard flickered just once, as though in answer, but she did not see. She turned away, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Inside the shard, the golden glow dimmed once more, its rhythm slowing to a soft, steady beat, the kind that might belong to a dream still sleeping. And if, somewhere deep within that dream, the faintest whisper lingered, "Guests welcome," it was not a threat, but a greeting, gentle and eternal, from a world that had finally found rest. At dawn, sunlight broke through the clouds and spilled across the world. It caught on the Thames, on the windows of Hogwarts far to the north, on the quiet gravestones in Godric's Hollow. Harry stood in the doorway of his home, coffee in hand, the scent of toast and laughter drifting from inside. He smiled faintly at the morning light. Peace, he thought at last, might not be a moment without ghosts, but a world where they no longer haunt. And so the day began, bright and ordinary, as all good endings should. The years had unspooled quietly, as they always do when peace finally holds its breath. The war was long past, the Hollow forgotten by all but memory, and yet the slow turning of time carried with it the faint ache of unfinished things. Harry had grown older, not weary exactly, but thoughtful. His hair was threaded with silver now, his eyes touched with a depth that came only from years spent looking into the dark and learning that the dark sometimes looked back with sorrow, not malice. He had left the ministry at last. The younger Aurors no longer needed his hand at their shoulders. They had been raised in a world free of war's shadow. He spent his days in Godric's Hollow, a place of still mornings and soft, lantern-lit nights. The world was quieter here. Birdsong, the rustle of leaves, the laughter of children who no longer whispered his name as legend, but as a kindly man who smiled when he passed them on the lane. And yet sometimes, in the gentle hours between dusk and dawn, the world would lean close again. A hush, a shimmer, as if something waited to speak. It was not threatening, it was memory itself, vast and ancient, brushing the edge of the living world. He had felt it in the lull of wind through trees, in the faint hum that lingered beneath the ticking of a clock. One morning he rose early and walked the boundary of the village. Mist clung to the hedgerows, and the air was sharp with the promise of rain. Beyond the last cottages where the earth sloped toward the moor, the fog thickened until the world became a ghostly blur of gray and silver. There, amid the drifting vapors, stood a figure. For a heartbeat, he thought it was merely a trick of light, but as he drew nearer, the shape grew clearer. A man tall and cloaked, his features obscured by shadow. Harry's hand went automatically to his wand, though age had slowed his draw. "You've not changed?" the stranger said, his voice a quiet echo. Harry froze. "Corvinus." The ghost inclined his head. He was dimmer now, almost transparent, yet his eyes still burned with that peculiar gentleness Harry had last seen in the Hollow's final light. "I told you the Hollow would drift, where memory lingers. You've built a quiet life, but even peace carries echoes." Harry let his hand fall from his wand. "I thought you'd gone on." "Gone?" The ghost's faint smile flickered. "Perhaps. But the Hollow and I were never separate things. You gave it rest, but rest is not the same as oblivion. You, too, know this." Harry studied him for a long moment. "Why return now? Because the world has begun to forget?" The words hung in the mist like frost. Gaunt stepped closer, his outline wavering. "Every age forgets its ghosts. The Hollow fed on sorrow, but it also preserved what time would devour, the fragments of lives unremembered. Without remembrance, magic withers. And so I come to ask, will you let it fade completely?" Harry's throat tightened. "It hurt people, Corvinus. It trapped them." "Yes," said the ghost softly, "because I built it from grief, not love. But you changed its heart. What remains now is not curse, but memory, the dream of what was. It asks only to exist quietly, as you exist quietly to be part of the world without consuming it. The mist shifted around them. Through it, Harry thought he saw fleeting images, faces long gone, moments long past. The Hollow's halls appeared for an instant, faint outlines of its grand staircases, its chandeliers, its endless corridors. But they were empty now, peaceful, filled only with light. He felt an ache of longing that surprised him. "You're asking me to let it live again." Gaunt inclined his head. "Not live, Maymew, remain. Memory cannot be caged forever, but nor can it be destroyed. It must be remembered to be at peace." Harry looked out across the moor where the fog was thinning. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, turning the mist to gold. "If it returns, will it hurt anyone?" "No," said Corvinus. "It is learned. You have taught it mercy." Harry hesitated for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. "Then let it remain." The ghost smiled, faint as moonlight. "Thank you, Harry Potter. You've done what none before you could. You turned sorrow into memory. That is all magic ever truly wanted." The wind stirred, and with it, Gaunt's form began to fade. "Will I see you again?" Harry asked. "You already do," murmured the ghost. "In every story told, in every name remembered, that is all we ever are." And then he was gone. That evening the mist returned. It rolled through the streets of Godric's Hollow like a slow tide, cool and sweet, and with it came the faintest fragrance of lilac. The villagers noticed nothing strange, only a pleasant haze that caught the lamplight and made the night seem softer. But to those who had known the old world, there was something more. A flicker in the glass, a gentle hum beneath the earth. Harry sat by the fire, the flames crackling softly. Ginny had gone to bed, and the house was still. He stared into the embers, feeling the faint tremor of something vast and unseen, pressing gently against the edges of the world. Not a threat, but a memory asking to be remembered. He rose and crossed to the window. Outside, the mist drifted across the garden, silvered by moonlight. And there, for just a moment, he saw it. The faint outline of tall windows, a grand doorway, the silhouette of a sign swaying in the wind. The Eldritch Hollow. Guests welcome. But there was no dread in the sight. The glow from its windows was warm, not cold. Its presence felt like an old melody rediscovered, familiar and kind. Harry smiled. "Stay then," he whispered quietly. The image flickered once, then faded into mist. Weeks later, a young traveler passing through the village stopped at the local inn. Over supper, he mentioned to the innkeeper that he had seen, just beyond the fields, a strange shimmer in the fog, like the shape of a house that vanished when he blinked. The innkeeper laughed softly. "Ah, that, folks say, it's just the air and the light. But some claim it's a dream of the old days, kept by a man who knew how to turn loss into peace." The traveler smiled, amused. "And what's it called, this dream house?" "They say," the innkeeper replied, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret, "it's the Hollow, but not cursed anymore. Just a place where the past comes to rest." The fire crackled, throwing shadows across the walls. Outside, the mist curled along the road, soft and silver, whispering like waves upon a shore. And far beyond the hills, where the boundary between world and memory thinned to nothing, a single light shone, steady, golden, eternal. The Hollow endured, not as a curse nor a wound, but as remembrance itself. The house where lost moments slept, dreaming softly of all that had been and all that would come again. And thus, even as the world moved on, its doors remained quietly open, forever waiting, forever kind. guests welcome. The years rolled on like calm water over stones. Time, once turbulent, moved gently through Harry's life. He no longer sought mysteries to chase or battles to fight. Instead, he lived quietly in Godric's Hollow, beneath the steady rhythm of the seasons. The cottage stood surrounded by wildflowers, its windows glowing with golden light each evening. Children's laughter, his grandchildren now, often echoed in the garden. The world, scarred by war but healed by years, had learned to breathe again. Yet sometimes, when the wind shifted and the air carried the scent of lilac, Harry felt the pulse of something ancient in the distance, a tremor not of fear, but of memory. He would pause in his work, mending a broomstick, sorting old letters, trimming the ivy that crept along the wall, and listen. The hollow had not returned to haunt him, nor to tempt him. It had become what all old magic longs to become: legend. One afternoon in early spring, Hermione came to visit. Her hair had turned silver at the edges, and her eyes, though kind as ever, bore the sharp gleam of a mind that never stopped searching. She set her cloak upon the hook by the door and smiled at him. "You've let the garden overgrow again." Harry chuckled. "I prefer it that way. Feels alive." "It feels wild," she said, glancing through the window. "But then, I suppose that's fitting for you?" He poured tea for them both. "Still working, I imagine?" "Of course," she replied. "I'm writing a book on temporal enchantments. The Hollow's case is, well, unique. I still can't quite decide whether it was a curse or something older." "Neither," said Harry softly. "It was grief that learned to speak." Hermione's eyes flickered toward him. "You still dream of it?" "Not often, but sometimes I see the lights again, far away. Not calling me, just reminding me they're there." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps it's not haunting you. Perhaps it's thanking you." He said nothing, and they drank their tea in the soft silence of old friends who had shared too much to need words. As the evening came on, Hermione rose to leave. "We'll see you at the Burrow on Sunday?" "I'll be there," he promised. After she disapparated, the cottage grew quiet again. The fire burned low. Outside, the moon hung bright and white over the fields, bathing everything in silver. Harry walked out into the garden, his breath misting in the cool air. Fireflies hovered over the flowers, tiny sparks of life dancing between the shadows. He leaned on the fence, gazing toward the distant hills. For a long moment the night was still. Then very faintly the mist began to rise along the horizon. It was pale and soft, no thicker than breath, yet within it he glimpsed a shape, tall windows, slanted roofs, a door standing open beneath a hanging sign, the Eldritch Hollow. It shimmered faintly as though woven from moonlight. Its light was gentle, almost tender, and through it came the faint sound of a bell. Harry's heart did not race this time. He felt no dread, no pull, only a quiet ache of recognition. "Still there," he murmured. A breeze carried the scent of lilac to him, warm and sweet. From the distant glow a figure appeared, a silhouette walking slowly toward him. He knew it at once. Corvinus Gaunt, the last of the cursed line, looked as if carved from the night itself. His robes stirred in the wind, his expression calm. "I thought you'd gone beyond," Harry said, though he already knew the answer. "I did," the ghost replied, "but some memories return when the world needs reminding. You and I share that burden." "Burden?" Harry echoed. "You mean remembrance?" Gaunt inclined his head. "Yes. The Hollow endures not as a wound, but as memory. You taught it compassion. You made it what it was meant to be. But magic, like all things, must be remembered or it will fade. And when the world forgets too deeply, the hollow opens once more, not to harm, but to remind. Harry smiled sadly. Then you're saying it's a part of the world now, like the tide, or time itself. Exactly so, Gaunt said, his voice softened. Do you ever wonder why you, of all men, were chosen to face it? Harry considered. Because I couldn't let go either. Gaunt's ghost smiled, a weary, knowing smile. That is what binds us. Grief and love are not so different. Both make us reach toward the impossible. They stood together in silence as the mist drifted closer. The hollow's faint outline shimmered like a reflection on water. Within its light, Harry thought he saw movement, figures dancing, laughter echoing softly. Not the lost, not the tormented, but peaceful shades at last. Gaunt turned to him. You've grown older, Harry Potter, but you've not forgotten what it means to be human. Harry laughed quietly. That's all any of us ever are, Corvinus. Human. And that, said the ghost, is why the hollow will never again be a prison. You gave it a heart. The words drifted through the night, and when Harry looked again, Gaunt was gone. Only the mist remained, thinning now, dissolving into the starlit air. The faint hum of the hollow faded with it until only the sound of the wind remained. He stood there a long while, breathing in the cool scent of earth and lilac, the weight in his chest lifting like mist at sunrise. Then, at last, he turned toward the cottage. Inside, the fire had burned low, and the house felt warm, alive. On the mantelpiece stood a single framed photograph. Himself, Ginny, and their children at the burrow many summers ago. He smiled at it, his eyes crinkling. The faces in the picture waved back, their laughter silent but eternal. Harry reached into his pocket and withdrew the small black notebook Kingsley had once given him. He opened it to the first blank page and, in a hand grown steadier with age, began to write. There was once a hotel that appeared in the fog. Those who entered could not leave, for it was built from time and sorrow. It fed on regret, yet longed for peace. And when it met compassion, it learned how to sleep. He paused, the quill hovering. Then he wrote the final words. And so the hollow dreams, not of pain, but of mercy. And those who remember it need not fear the past, for the past, too, can be gentle. He closed the book and placed it on the mantel beside the photograph. Outside, the wind shifted once more, carrying a sound faint and familiar. The soft toll of a bell far away, like a farewell that was also a promise. Harry smiled, his eyes half closed. "Good night," he whispered. The bell rang once more, then was silent. And though the hollow still wandered the edges of the world, appearing where grief was deepest, where memory clung to love, it no longer bound, no longer stole. It simply watched, gentle as dusk, guarding those who could not yet let go. It had become what Harry always believed magic should be. Not power, not curse, but understanding. And so it remained, unseen yet eternal, in the spaces between worlds, waiting quietly beneath the veil of mist, its door forever open, its words forever kind. Guests welcome.